Welcome back to another episode of TMH Sportscast, and Miami has now won 2 in a row, the first time since October 4th. They beat Florida State, and then the previous game before that was September 20th against the Florida Gators. A 41-7 win against the NC State Wolfpack, and Liam, it could have been their most dominant and most complete game in a long time.
I hope I don't regret saying this, but Miami's back. They look like the national championship contenders they were made out to be earlier in the season. And when you look at this NC State team going into this, they were a frisky 5-4 team that just beat and hung 48 points on the number one undefeated team in the ACC, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. They won 48-36, and without their star players in that game too. And so going into here, they had a bye week to rest up their guys, and they returned some of their best players on offense in Justin Jolie and Hollywood Smothers. And Miami just absolutely curb stomped them. It was insane. And when you think about it, this NC State team was not your run-of-the-mill Stanford or Syracuse type game. This was a team that is levels above that type of competition, and yet Miami made them look like a Bethune-Cookman type team. It was crazy if you just look at the stats. I mean, NC State was averaging over 32 points per game. They had the fourth best offense in the ACC going into that game. It sure did not look like that when you roll back the tape on Saturday afternoon, because this game was just something special in terms of the Miami defense. You have to give kudos to Corey Heatherman and his defensive staff and what he's done with this program. Just the turnaround that it's been since last year. It's been absolutely marvelous to watch as a Miami fan. And let's go ahead and look at the stats real quick here, because this kind of just encapsulates the whole game and the experience of it when you just look at the numbers. Because sometimes it doesn't, but in this game, the stats really do tell all of the story. 581 yards to 143 total yards. Miami with almost a 400-yard advantage, and pretty much NC State had less than 100 yards going into their final drive of the game in garbage time when Miami had their backups in and they scored a touchdown. In terms of passing, Miami had 367 yards compared to NC State's only 120. And then here's the kicker. It's the rushing game. Miami put up 214 with Gerard Pringle leading the way, and we'll get to more on him in a second. But NC State, only 23 on the day, with the best running back in the ACC in Hollywood Smothers and a mobile quarterback somewhat in CJ Bailey. Just an absolute dominant performance from start to finish from this defense. And if they can continue winning in this fashion, I don't see how the College Football Playoff Committee does not put them in the playoffs. It's so early to tell, and right now they're sitting outside of it, just barely on the bubble. But if they can keep winning in this way against Virginia Tech and Pitt down the stretch, they'll be at 10-2. And they will look like a team that has completely transformed since the last time they lost to SMU. So it'll be just interesting to see. But any of your final thoughts on this game before we get into the drive-by-drive recap here?
I mean, it felt fun to watch Miami Hurricanes football again for a few games now, and just looked like the guys were really having fun out there. I was expecting it to be a much closer game than it actually was. I thought CJ Bailey was going to come into his hometown and light it up, but he only threw for 120 yards. And just did not show much. He was the leading rusher because the Miami run defense was really spectacular throughout the whole afternoon.
And I'll be honest, this game did kind of shock me. It's the most surprised I've been in a Miami result since their loss to Louisville. I'll be honest, because I actually did kind of think in the back of my mind, the dark recesses of my conscience, Miami might lose this game. I was actually kind of worried, and boy, did they prove me wrong. So with that being said, to really show you how much they absolutely crushed NC State, let's dissect this game quarter by quarter, starting with the first quarter, of course, where the offense kind of started somewhat slow once again. They obviously picked up the pace later on, but they only put up 3 points in the first 15 minutes from Carson Beck's side of the ball. But the defense was once again the unit that picked up the slack for this offense, and we saw it while basically playing a complete game. Sure, they let up that touchdown in the final minutes with their 3s and 4 guys in, but this game was perfect through all 4 quarters, in my opinion. Like you said earlier, the most complete game, in my opinion, that Miami has played all season. The offense, I'd say, was great for the 3 quarters of the game. Maybe not this first quarter, but when you look into it, in their second drive of the game, they had their first fumble of the entire season. It was a check down to Marty Brown, who had it, caught it, and then just got absolutely pummeled by an oncoming DB from NC State. Lost the ball. NC State picked it up, and it looked like there was about to be a significant swing in momentum going the Wolfpack's way. But defense, of course, saves Miami's offense's butts once again with an incredible pick six courtesy of Jacoby Thomas, who is a player that we will get into more once we get after this game recap here. But he had a 60-yard pick six that he took all the way back to the crib. And he also, I don't know if you saw this, but I thought he flipped off CJ Bailey at first. Turns out he was just pointing at him like, I want you to come here, and TJ Bailey tried tackling him, but it was too late, and he was already in the end zone. So he was phenomenal in this game. One of the star players, probably the star player of this entire game from both units. So he was phenomenal. And then the next drive, NC State looking to find an answer. And once again, it's caution Kobe corralling the catch for another interception. Really, really strong performance on the defensive side of the ball once again for Miami. And so the quarter ends 10-0. Still no offensive touchdowns or scores besides that field goal for the offense. So it's 10-0. And then you go into the second quarter. Miami wakes up on offense 5 minutes in, finally. And just like it was against Syracuse, it's one explosive play that activates it all. And this time, it was Malachi Toney with the absolute rope to JoJo Traynor down the sideline. We saw it last game where it was Carson Beck, the 25-yard pass to Keelan Marion, which eventually led to the Dalen Upshaw 42-yard screen run. This time, though, it was Malachi Toney setting things in motion. He was the puppeteer.
And for some reason, Liam, when these big plays happen, I'm in the press box looking at my computer writing, and then I hear an ooh and ah in the crowd, and I'm just like, oh my God, I just missed the play live. But keep on going.
That's the Malachi Toney experience.
Yeah.
This guy coming from American heritage led his team to a state championship at Signal Caller with Dia Bell down, and this guy just steps up in big moments. And actually, the funny thing about that, was that Shannon Dawson in the post-game presser said that because Malachi Toney has such a good vision in the pocket because of his prior experience at QB, he actually gave him multiple reads on this play. Usually when you give it to a wide receiver for a flea flicker, it's this one straight go option, easy to find and easy to throw down. This time, though, it was actually kind of a more nuanced, complex setup. And Malachi Toney rolled through his first progression, didn't see an option, and so he threw it to JoJo Traynor on his second read. And that's what led to the big gain. So that's something that just shows Malachi Toney's poise and experience and overall veteran qualities as a true freshman, and just shows why he's so special and that Miami needs to keep him. Because, hey, there's some institutions down in Gainesville that I know need a quarterback. South Carolina, Arizona State, they may need a new change at QB if those guys enter the transfer portal there. So let's just say, Miami, you need to hold on to Malachi Toney with dear life, because this guy, he cannot lead the program. He just cannot as a hometown kid. And so then, after that, the Miami offense just keeps rolling. It's a nine-play, 66-yard drive with, once again, Toney being the guy that ends it all with a beautiful post route. Carson Beck puts it on a platform, drops it right into the breadbasket. And I was actually watching this play live. You were too. What happened was Toney wasn't even done creating separation yet from his defender, but Carson Beck saw it out. Great read by him and threw it to the back of the end zone where this guy was money. And it made it a really, really big scoreline that made it almost seem out of reach for NC State. It was. And it really just kind of carried Miami's momentum into the halftime where they were leading 24-0. And so going into the third quarter now, Miami just picks up right where they left off. And it's probably their best drive of the entire game. It's an 85-yard march, 5-minute long drive. And Elijah Lofton is the guy that finishes it off this time, who, by the way, much deserved touchdown from him after some nasty drops earlier in the game on some pretty easy screen plays. Obviously, of course, against SMU, he had that very critical drop in the end zone, so he was overdue. Long awaited touchdown from him. It was a beautiful catch over the shoulder, and that finally, hopefully, will get some more momentum into his game and get some more confidence with him as a worthy pass catcher in this Shannon Dawson offense. And so Miami just continues to buff the score sheet there. They get a field goal on the next drive, which is almost completely led by Gerard Pringle, a true freshman running back that is kind of adding another element to this Miami offense. We'll get to him when we talk more about the offense later on. He was absolutely special today as well.
Yeah, and he had a few really, really big runs in that third quarter when they scored for that field goal, which you kind of thought they were going to go all the way down the field, but they didn't. And then the offense kind of got going again in that fourth quarter.
Yeah, and so third quarter ends 34-0. Insane. And then fourth quarter, it's just kind of like game managing at this point. Mm-hmm. It's garbage time. Miami offense goes down for another score. Malachi Toney gets his second receiving touchdown of the day with the 15-yard on a short route where he runs it all the way into the corner. So that was nice from him to get a second touchdown because he kind of wasn't really much on the score sheet in prior games. He was still making a big impact, against SMU. He had that really critical punt return. He had some good throwing plays, I believe, in the game before that against Syracuse. So he was still very active, but this time he's finally getting into the end zone. And then after that, game's over, game's decided. Miami rolls out the backups. 10 minutes left. Emory Williams takes his first drive of the game, and it ends in a meaningless missed field goal Don't want to see the special teams failing there, but still, it didn't really matter at that point. It was way out of reach already. And then C.J. Bailey punches it in for a garbage time touchdown. Not really much to say there. I mean, he was playing against, Miami's reserve players. So, consolation touchdown for him in his homecoming game, which left a lot to be desired. And then Luke Nickel ends it off with the final drive, so you could see Cristobal showing some rotation and with his QBs getting both of those guys some playing time, which could prove critical so that maybe they don't leave in the portal. They need those minutes, and so that can be good there. And then game ends 41-7, and that is your story. This team just rolling through the NC State Wolfpack, a team that was projected to put up a lot of points on Miami. The spread was 14.5. Miami more than covered, but still, it was a very impressive display and very, very beneficial towards their college football resume, in my opinion.
Yeah, I really like towards the end of the game, we got to see Emory Williams, which it's a good call by Cristobal, taking out Carson Beck in such a high-scoring affair where the lead was 41-0 at the time. And you got to see Luke Nickel. He had one explosive play, threw for 44 yards, and maybe that could be the future of the Miami offense, but there's a lot to be seen, and you got to focus on the what's happening right in front of you, and then that stuff will happen down the line come the spring. But yeah, Liam, what do you think were your big takeaways during this one?
I think if we're talking about takeaways now, you have to start with the defense and give kudos to what Corey Heatherman has done. He's reaching blank check territory with Miami. It's getting to a point where you have to be grateful for the time he's had with Miami because it's not going to last much longer at this rate he's going at. He's going to find a head coaching job pretty soon, most likely. And you're hoping that Miami can find the funds to keep him on their staff for as long as possible. But I do believe it's going to be temporary just because of how good he's been. Both sides were incredible, but it was really the defense that stole the show here. They played perfect through all four quarters, and in my opinion, they pitched a shutout. It was a starter shutout, right? I don't think it counts, that last touchdown. Sure, it technically does, but it shouldn't really count when you have your backups in, and NC State still has their starter guys in, so whatever. It's a shutout in my book, and it's an incredible defensive display, and at the epicenter of it all was Jacoby Thomas, who was lights out. He was the best player on the field. You look at the PFF grades after the game, Defensive Player of the Week, the best defensive back in all of college football over the weekend. 98 overall grade, one of the highest grades we've ever seen from a player this season, which is saying something when you got Ruben Bay on your team as well. And so this guy, 7 yards allowed only on 4 targets, basically just put the clamps on his wide receiver the whole game, didn't allow him to see the live day. 2 interceptions, 1 pass breakup, a 0 passer rating allowed, and a 96.2 coverage grade. Just absolutely insane. But what I think the bigger part is, what the stats don't tell you, was how massively he stepped up in the absence of Keontae Scott.
I was about to say that. I mean, Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas were really a dynamic duo for the past 4 or 5 weeks, but when he had to take over, he did a really good job of that. Jacoby Thomas, and he had 2 interceptions. That's pretty big. The defense, grabbing that ball and another defensive score when he ran it in 60 yards. That was really my highlight of the game, and that play set the tone for Miami on both sides of the ball.
For sure, and talking more on Keontae Scott, it's a big loss. Cristobal said before the game that he's likely going to be out for the season. So unless Miami can mount a huge playoff run here and draw out their season until late December or January, it's looking like he's going to be shut down for the rest of the year. He was seen in a walking boot, which is never a good sign. And it's a big loss because he was the Jim Thorpe semifinalist. He was touted as the best cornerback in college football this late into the season. But Jacoby Thomas, next man up. And he said, hold my mouth guard. After Keontae Scott had the pick 6 in the last game, Jacoby Thomas follows it right up with another defensive touchdown in this game. And Tennessee fans, because that's where he transferred from, are punching the air right now after the whole debacle going on right now with defensive back Boo Carter, a very good defensive back that just transferred out of the program because he didn't meet the locker room standard, according to head coach Josh Heupel at Tennessee. Some definitely turmoil and controversy there, and I can only imagine how mad Tennessee fans are for letting Jacoby Thomas go and letting Boo Carter stay.
Well, I mean, Jacoby Thomas, he's a dog on the field, and now you talked about Keontae Scott being likely out for the whole season. It is a big blow for him, 6-year senior. I assume does have another year of eligibility, but I hope he finds himself somewhere at the higher level in the coming months. But Keontae Scott really a big story for the success the Miami defense has had this season.
And we're giving so much praise to Jacoby Thomas, but you also have to give your big kudos to other guys in the secondary too, because it wasn't just him. It was a total team performance from that group. Xavier Lucas, Zechariah Poyser, Bryce Fitzgerald, who's another true freshman. This 2025 class has just been absolutely insane for Miami. Malachi Tony, Gerard Pringle, Fitzgerald, who leads the team in interceptions, just lights out from this group. Just speaks volumes to the recruiting job that Mario Cristobal has done, for all the flack that we give him for his in-game managing. His recruiting is just on another level. So it really just does seem that this Miami group is buying in to the next minute mentality. But then speaking on another great defensive player for this game, Akeem Mesidor, who has been that man all season, except for that one game he missed due to injury against Stanford. He has been the guy without any really sort of drop-off the entire year. And just once again, another display of brutality and torment against this vulnerable offensive line from NC State. Led the team with 5 total tackles, had 1 sack, and 2 tackles for loss. He was the highest graded ACC defensive lineman of the week with a 90.3 overall grade. And just, once again, a formidable guy that's going to go easily in the first round of the NFL draft, in my opinion. So we talked now about the individual performances that really stepped up, but as a whole, this team just absolutely smothered NC State's offensive weapons. So let's just real quick go over the stat lines that these NC State offensive guys put up, because they're supposed to be some big numbers, and they were quite the opposite. So, starting with Hollywood Smothers, who was the best running back in the ACC statistically, averaging over 100 yards per game, better than Isaac Brown, -2 yards in 7 carries. Just complete, what's the word? Embarrassment?
I would say embarrassment.
Embarrassment, or maybe just
Or
lack of any production whatsoever, just completely ineffective.
inefficient, yeah.
Inefficiency, whatever you want to call it. Miami just absolutely gobbled him up all game on that defensive front. And it was great to see another guy, Duke Scott, who went off against Georgia Tech, 24 carries for 196 yards, 1 touchdown. That was his former team he was playing against, so it was a little bit of a revenge game. He had 7 carries for 14 yards in this game. Just absolutely no show. And you talk about no show, it doesn't stop there, because Justin Jolie, who is praised as one of the best tight ends in the country, 1 reception for 7 yards. Non-existent.
I mean, really, the offense as a whole could not get it going. You know, Duke Scott was the leading receiver in that game with 40 yards, 40 yards on three receptions. And it just C.J. Bailey targeted to a lot of different receivers, but he didn't really have time to throw because that Miami defensive line kept on going at him.
Yeah, none of the actual pass catchers had anything more than 4 receptions for more than 25 yards. Just nothing there in terms of generating any type of offense whatsoever. C.J. Bailey, who's the architect of this group, the trigger man for this dynamic, pass-heavy, yardage-heavy offense that we were, so conditioned to see week in and week out from NC State. Third in ACC in passing, 268 yards per game from Bailey. His audition for Miami, and what we called it in our preview last week, went about as well as Eminem in that first verse of Lose Yourself. Just totally pee the bed, right? He might need a neuralizer from Men in Black. Just needs a little bit one of those quick flashes, of the
I know
pen.
what you're talking about.
They say athletes have short memories. I think you need to apply that to here. The goldfish method. Just forget about this game and move on, because definitely not a homecoming to remember for C.J. Bailey, to say the least.
Yeah, I think C.J. Bailey, a very talented quarterback, just didn't have his A game tonight or last Saturday against Miami, and that goes to the credit of Miami. They game planned properly for him, but look for C.J. Bailey to be successful down the road again with this NC State squad for the rest of the season. Absolutely,
yeah. I fully expect him to bounce back, but the stats speak for themselves. 17 for 30, 120 yards, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and a 13.6 QBR. Just, throw this game out. Just throw it out there. So, NC State, though, they did have a high red zone conversion rate going into this game. So what was Miami's solution to that? Just don't let them even see the light of day in Miami's territory at all. Because NC State didn't have one single play beyond the 50-yard line of Miami's defensive half for the entire game until that last fourth quarter drive. That's just insane to me. 32 points per game, and you're not even getting past the 50 against Miami. So that's just another stat that really kind of speaks volumes to how well Miami's defense played in this game. And then my final takeaway from here is that if you look more into the weeds of it too, you see that in the stat line for sacks, Miami only had 1 on the game, but that really doesn't say much to how well they played, because it was almost as if they learned from their past mistakes against Louisville, where they maybe blitzed and applied too much pressure, and it allowed Miller Moss to just find those short balls down in the flats pretty easily because there wasn't anyone there to cover that. And in this game, Miami kind of adjusted to that, and so they kind of dropped some more defenders back into that space. And so C.J. Bailey really had no options down there. So sure, he had a little bit more time in the pocket, but he had no one to throw to. And you could see it in his passing numbers. They just were abysmal.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about this defense, but I think we got to talk about how potent this Miami offense was. And we got to start with the biggest thing on the score sheet, which is Gerard Pringle Jr., the freshman running back, 17 carries, 116 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but was super, super effective. And going into the game, Liam, I was like, okay, Mark Fletcher Jr. is out. It's going to be the Marty Brown and Jordan Lyle game. And oh boy, was I wrong. You saw Mario Cristobal praise Pringle after the game. Pringle talked a little bit to the media, but a really strong performance, and he stepped up to the occasion. I think the game plan is to hand the rock to Pringle against this game against Virginia Tech coming up.
Yeah, and you talk about next man up mentality. Gerard Pringle may have asserted himself as the lead back going forward. I think he completely overtook Jordan Lyle on the depth chart. And, Jordan Lyle may not be having the best run of games now after his injury. Hasn't really looked the same, looked maybe a little bit more slow, just not as sharp off the edge. But Gerard Pringle is just a completely different story. He's a true freshman, and he's just a lightning bolt of a running back. He's kind of small for his size, 5'10", 190 pounds. He was a 4-star recruit, number 7 running back in the nation for his recruiting class coming out of Armwood High School in Tampa, Florida. So a hometown guy. Had offers from pretty much everywhere: Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Georgia, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee. All the power schools, the powerhouses of programs at his fingertips, and he chose to go with Miami, and it really does seem to be paying off. We talked about how he needed an elevated role, and it seemed that the coaching staff was listening because they gave him the rock, and it paid off dividends for this offense. Look at his stats right here: 17 carries, 116 yards, 6.8 yards per carry, and almost 1 touchdown if it wasn't for Malachi Tony just slightly overthrowing him on that really nice gadget play where he was lined up in the Wildcat. Gerard Pringle, if he just dropped in a little bit shorter, he had acres of space to just do a walk-in touchdown, but instead it was slightly over his head, and it was incompletion, but Gerard Pringle, phenomenal on the day.
And it goes back to the model that you got to wait for your time to come. And really in any sport, and I think about the NFL right now. I think about the Cleveland Browns, Joe Flacco to Dylan Gabriel, now to Shedeur Sanders. It'll be interesting to see what Shedeur does on Sunday. But it's really wait your turn and then capitalize on the effort, and Gerard Pringle did just that.
And from just a 10,000-foot point of view, looking at this offense as a whole, it was starting to get kind of stagnant. We talked about this after the loss to SMU. It needed a breath of fresh air in terms of the run game. A lot of just design runs up the middle, up the gut for Mark Fletcher to exploit as kind of that bowling ball running back that he was. Jordan Lyle not really generating much of the flair that he was supposed to. Marty Brown, we know he's more of the short yardage back. They needed another element, and what Gerard Pringle does is he now adds another dimension into this offense, and it's really something special to watch because it's almost now as if there's 2 Malachi Tonys on the field. They look similar, and they really play similar as well. They're just explosive guys that can get it done from all types of different bag plays that this team throws at you. And it is something special to watch down the line going forward because with Gerard Pringle lined up in the backfield, Malachi Tony lined up out wide, it's going to be another wrinkle for defenses to have to game plan against, and it's going to be tough for them to defend both of that in that tandem that they have.
But how about the passing from Carson Beck? Probably the most efficient performance in some time. He looked confident out there. He looked like his old self. 20 for 27, 291 yards, and 3 TDs. 2 of them to Malachi Tony. Super efficient, super clean game from Carson.
And what I really love is that he really does seem to be adjusting to the new players that he's being dealt with. He just seems to be jiving with this new group of guys. You have Josh Moore now in the rotation. You have Dalen Upshaw now out there playing a pretty significant role. But maybe most critically, Keelan Marion, who was really set up as the number 1 guy, number 1 target for Beck after the injury of C.J. Daniels. It does look like C.J. Daniels will be back for this game against Virginia Tech, but he was supposed to be back against NC State, but he was ruled out as a game-time decision. But it didn't matter because Beck was finding all sorts of players everywhere. Keelan Marion went for 7 receptions for 96 yards. He's really morphing into Beck's number 1 downfield guy, especially on third down situations. He's the number 1 go-to man there. Josh Moore, really tenacious at the catch point. The 50-50 balls are his all day long. When it's just him and another guy one-on-one, if it comes down to a jump off situation, Josh Moore's getting that over the other guy all day long. And then, of course, Malachi Toney continuing to be Malachi Toney. 5 receptions, 54 yards, 2 touchdowns, and almost 2 passing touchdowns if you think about the JoJo Trader throw as well as the missed throw on Gerard Pringle. So just the receivers are getting it done. Carson Beck is getting it done. And this offense is firing on all cylinders now with the running game and the passing game.
Yeah, and that was Carson Beck in another season. So he's a one and done season for him as a Hurricane as he looks to go to the NFL draft, and that was the last time he'll probably see the field at Hard Rock Stadium, along with a bunch of other seniors and a bunch of other crucial members of the game. But now Miami has to go on the road. They're 1-1 on the road. They beat Florida State. They lost in a heartbreaking fashion to SMU, and 3 times in the past 2 years, opposing team at their home place has stormed the field against Miami. And Miami does not want to let the Virginia Tech Hokie fans storm the field.
NC State was a great sign of what this offense can show going down the line, but now they need to prove it. Virginia Tech should be a game that they should easily win, and they kind of need to if they want to stay alive in the playoff race. They can't just win this narrowly. It has to be a blowout. They're favored by 16.5 points. And if you look down here at the matchups, Miami's 8-2, 4-2 in the ACC. Meanwhile, Virginia Tech is 3-7 and 2-4 in the ACC. Look at their season. It's kind of just been going off the rails. It started off going 0-3, lost to some respectable opponents at first in South Carolina and Vanderbilt, but then the real kicker was when they lost to Old Dominion, which got their coach, Brent Pry, fired. Philip Montgomery is now the interim. They're kind of dealing with some off-field distractions at the moment with James Franklin stepping up. A huge home run hire, in my opinion. I think that is very encouraging for Virginia Tech going down the line. But for this season, he won't be taking over, and right now Virginia Tech looks very vulnerable. Miami's on a 4-game win streak versus the Hokies since 2020. The last time Virginia Tech won was in 2019 in a 42-35 win. But if we want to talk about the last game out last year, it was a fireworks show because this game was maybe a little bit too exciting for both Miami and Virginia Tech fans. It was a thriller. It was a 38-34 thriller, and Miami got a win by the skin of their teeth after a Hail Mary touchdown was reversed. It was originally called a score for Virginia Tech in the dying seconds with, I believe, 12 seconds left in the game. But goes through review, and Miami does come out with a win after it's ruled an incompletion.
Yeah, I was there in last year when they played Virginia Tech, and I was holding my breath for maybe 10 minutes. And that game really helped Miami be more confident that season, except when they lost Georgia Tech when it went to go downhill after that. But it kind of set the tone for the Cam Ward era of Miami Hurricanes football.
And that being said, this game was really fun to watch, but if this upcoming game is as close as it was in 2024, something will go terribly wrong. It cannot be that close, or else Miami will be in deep trouble with the committee. They need to win convincingly. They need to crush Virginia Tech and leave no doubt. Otherwise, their chances of reaching the playoff are going to be severely diminished after this weekend. So, hoping they can take care of business. And when you look at the time that they're playing, it's very encouraging for the Hurricanes. They play at noon, of course, away in Blacksburg at Lane Stadium. It's good because you don't want them playing at night. Virginia Tech is notoriously a very hostile environment, very tough to play at night. They have the iconic Enter Sandman entrance that they do, which really can strike a lot of fear into opponents. And also that Virginia Tech crowd can get really rowdy at night, as we all know, when the tailgates can go pretty late, get a few brewskis in them. So when you're playing a noon game on ESPN, it's a very encouraging sign for the Hurricanes. The weather, you were talking about it earlier, 61 degrees?
61 degrees, the sun's going to be out, and for Miami, it's going to be hot on the field because obviously that's what the sun does, and so it shouldn't feel too cold for them. It should be a nice breeze, and it's really amazing football weather for the Northeast at this time of year on the weekend before Thanksgiving. So
that's the weather, but now let's get into the minutia of this game, the actual statistical analysis, because the weather isn't going to win the game for the Canes by itself. And overall, when you look at Virginia Tech, they do seem kind of one-dimensional, and that's a pretty positive sign for the Canes. They have a really solid run game, but no passing attack, and that could really be their demise. Their offensive numbers have suffered as a result. They are 14th in scoring, averaging 23 points per game. By reference, Miami is 5th. And then defensively, pretty much the same. They're 14th in the ACC in defense as well. They're letting up 30 per game, while Miami is first in the ACC, only letting up about 14. So a big disparity there. But when you talk about this run game, that is going to be their key go-to, I think, in terms of what they're going to be able to do. Kyron Jones has the ability to turn on the Jets, But talking about the running backs, Marcellus Hawkins and Terrion Stewart are the two guys to watch. Hawkins is a dog. He's a transfer from a D2 school, Central Missouri, and he's been putting up great numbers all season, averaging 6.2 yards per carry, which is more than Mark Fletcher has been doing. And while he may not have breakaway speed, he's not that kind of fast, twitchy guy like Gerard Pringle. He's really good at initiating contact and breaking away from tackles after that.
Yeah, he had a really nice run against Florida State last game, going up the sideline. It was the first play of the game, and that was promising. 101 yards, had a solid performance.
And also, Terrion Stewart's kind of the same way, same archetypical build. 5'9", 222 pounds, like a little mini Pekka. Going to be hard to bring down there in the backfield. But the passing game has been a non-factor. And when you look at it, Aiden Green is the number one guy. Only about 400 yards in the season, I believe. Yes, 421 yards with 26 catches. Pretty small numbers. Donovan Green was the number two guy. No relation. They're not brothers. Just coincidence. He actually transferred out of the program after the dismal start that they had to the season. So he's gone. So they really only have one guy lined up out there that Miami should worry about. And by the way, this secondary has been playing for the Hurricanes so far down the stretch. It should be a game where they can feast on some turkey in the Virginia Tech Gobblers in this game in Thanksgiving fashion. So that is a positive sign. They're literally the worst receiving offense in the ACC, period, averaging only 170 yards per game. Their running back group is actually averaging more than that alone, which is kind of alarming because usually your passing game should generate way more yards than the game on the ground. But I beg to differ there.
And Kyron Jones, I was watching some of his film. He has all the potential to throw the ball down the field. I think when he has an open guy, he can really sling it. But getting those tight pockets, he hasn't been so great in this season. And maybe it is the talent on the receiving end. But he's been the quarterback for Virginia Tech this third season. I'd like to see a little bit more out of him. And we'll see what kind of juice the home fans of the Virginia Tech Hokies can bring to maybe help him out a bit.
Yeah, let's talk about Kyron Jones because he is kind of the wild card of this game for Virginia Tech. Depending on how he plays, this game could go either way for the Hokies. It could be either really close. I think either way Miami's going to win, but it could either be kind of a shootout game or it could be an absolute blowout because Kyron Jones has been very inconsistent this season. The tools and the attributes are all there, but sometimes he just is not making the right throws. His vision is not the best at times when he's throwing the ball. And as a result, this offense is suffering at times, especially against teams like the Old Dominion Monarchs, a team that they should be crushing. But that's not the case. Kyron Jones is more of a dual threat than C.J. Bailey, so he will likely be using his legs to extend plays more often. Very good mobile quarterback that offers a big presence, running the ball, in between the gaps. Miami, what I think they need to do is kind of offer a spy on him to make sure that he can't get to that interior escape lane. He's very good at making plays off schedule, and that's where he's able to excel with his receivers down the field on the scramble drill. But conversely, he's actually not that great in the pocket when he has time. So it helps that he actually does have a bad offensive line because he's good in plays where he has to improvise. So in that sense, he's almost sort of like a Dollar General Cam Ward.
Dollar General Cam Ward. I'm going to have to quote you on that one. I'm going to hang it up on a wall somewhere.
Yeah, hopefully that doesn't come back to bite me. I don't think it will, but you heard it here first. I do think that he doesn't have the same kind of potential as Cam Ward, considering his age and the trajectory he's been on so far in his collegiate career. He has 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 22 sacks on the year. He's probably going to use a lot of designed rollouts and run fakes to draw the defense in and then exploit them that way. But I think Miami will be ready for it. He's 13 for 15. He's 13 out of 15 of the quarterbacks in the ACC in terms of completion rate. So just not very accurate when he has time. 58% completion rate. Carson Beck, by comparison, is around 71%. So, big difference there between the two guys. And then the defense, switching gears, is very vulnerable. And that's the part where I think Miami should be able to flood the gates in terms of an offensive performance. I think they should put up a barrage of points. They are 15th in sacks, 15th in interceptions, and 15th in fumbles forced. So all those turnover stats in terms of lost yardage, they are not doing well whatsoever in the ACC.
And if you look back to the last game against Florida State, they had 237 yards on the ground between a combined, it's like 1, 2, like almost 8 guys like running the football or close to 10. So that run defense is not there for the Hokies.
And when you look at the Miami offensive line versus the Virginia Tech defensive line, that's probably the matchup to watch out for the most. Miami offensive front, we already know how good they are. 16.5% pressure rate on the quarterback. That is the lowest in the entire country. No other team comes close. I think the next lowest percentage is not even lower than 20%. And the Virginia Tech defensive line is respectable. They're pretty good, just not on the same level, I believe, as Miami's offensive front seven. They are 24th in the country in pass rush grade with an 81.4 rating. They have a few good guys in Cody Huseman and Kamari Copeland, who are the third and sixth players among defensive tackles in the country in terms of pass rush grade. Their edge rusher, Ben Bell, is also got to watch out for down there, towards the hash marks. He's sixth in the ACC with an 82.9 pass rush grade. So a few guys that you got to watch out for, but I think that shouldn't really hold much of a challenge to Maui Okunlola, all these guys on Miami's offensive line.
It seems like the levels are different in terms of the talent on both sides. Any final thoughts before we go into predictions here?
Yeah, I think overall Carson Beck should have a monster game if all these stats are telling the same story. I think Miami should go on to have this game in the bag with relative ease pretty early with all the factors in terms of the time they're playing this game, the weather, the defensive and offensive matchups that they have going against Virginia Tech. They should win this game by a large margin, and they need to win this game by a large margin. So with that being said, what's your prediction?
Well, personally, Liam, Miami playing on the road scares me from a historical factor, and I unfortunately don't think it's going to be that wide of a margin. I'm thinking 33-23, Miami wins.
Okay, so you're saying they do not cover.
Don't cover.
They need to win. They need to win by at least 17 points in order to cover the spread, which actually might prove pretty pivotal because I'm pretty sure the committee is going to be looking at that for some reason. All other teams are just judged off of wins, but Miami, it's going to be if they cover the spread. So the odds are stacked against them. They need to drop down a few more spots to get into a comparable tier, as the director of the committee calls it, with Notre Dame, because then the head-to-head factor can start to be, counted in there. And that's when Miami can really jump Notre Dame in that last college football playoff spot. So they're hoping that not only can they win out, but also have a few things in front of them, fall into place. They currently have Utah, BYU, and I believe Alabama in front of them. Miami is currently ranked 13th. So they need a few chips to fall down in the right places, and hopefully they can drop a few games. But with that being said, I do believe Miami does take care of business here. It's just going to be left to a matter of the external factors. So give me Miami winning 38-14 in a dominant offensive display that takes them into the most important game of the season against Pittsburgh.
It's a much higher margin for me. I'm just like, from watching those two games last year, Liam, for Syracuse and Georgia Tech, man, it just haunts me, brings back some bad memories. But Miami looking to really be dominant in this one. But I think that will do it. We'll be back in just a few minutes, and we'll talk to Thomas Hughes, lead editor of the Virginia Tech Sports Illustrated page. Thank you all.
Welcome back to the TMH Sportscast. We're joined by Thomas Hughes, lead editor of Virginia Tech Sports Illustrated page. Thomas, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here. Just came off of the backs of a men's basketball game, but today we're going to be talking football. A lot of positive optimism surrounding Virginia Tech sports right now.
It's definitely an understatement, it feels like. Virginia Tech faces its best opponent of the season this weekend, and it's not even close to being the biggest story out of Blacksburg. Biggest news to come out of the college football world this week, of course, is that on Monday it was officially announced that James Franklin will be the next head coach of the Hokies. What's your instant knee-jerk opinion on the hire?
Well, I think that Franklin, in my opinion, Franklin was my top candidate for who I would have pursued. You look at him, you look at his track record, 128 and 60 career record, 104 and 45 at Penn State, made 6 New Year's Six bowls. This is a guy that's proven that he can win. You get into the question of, there's the big game question, 4-21, I think, against AP top 10. So it's a question of, can he win the big games? Virginia Tech hasn't proven that they can make the big games in a while. They haven't proven that they can do that consistently in a while. So I think at the very least, he's a floor raiser, and that's what I think Virginia Tech is desperately needed.
And his contract right now is set to last with the Hokies for the next 5 years. Where do you see Virginia Tech standing as a program by the end of that 5-year timeline under the supervision of James Franklin?
I'd hope at minimum that it would be a consistent 8-win program a year, because right now it seems like that has been set around 5 or 6. So if you can get that total up to 8, I think that would be an improvement. I think the last time that they captured 8 wins might have been 2017. So it's been a while since the program has been able to consistently do that. So even that would be a monumental improvement from where this program has been over the past decade.
And it seems like it's the perfect time for the hire too. There's almost like a power vacuum in the ACC right now. No team is really standing out. And even though me and Zach are Miami fans, I think this is ultimately a good hire for the ACC in general because it raises the level of competition, kind of gets them back on that pedestal they haven't been on for a while. So with that being said, I actually saw a recent article on your page talking about if James Franklin is now the best coach in the ACC. Do you think that he is
Yes, I do think that he is.
over like Dabo Sweeney and some of the more tenured guys in the league right now?
I think so, yeah. I think just when you look at the body of work, you look at last year, this team was really 3 points short of competing for a national championship against Ohio State last year. And for whatever reason, just didn't seem like the pieces clicked this year. Delivered a winning outfit.
Zach, go ahead.
Does Miami's like recent surge, they've been 2 straight wins, feel like they're the ACC's top team again? And from the VT perspective, does it feel like it's the Hokies' toughest game of the year?
Well, it feels neck and neck right there with the Georgia Tech game. Because going into the Georgia Tech game, I felt like when I talked to my staff writers and when I talked to other people in the industry, kind of felt like a thing of where, oh, you come into this game and you're not favored. You don't think that you're going to win. They did think that they were going to cover. Ended up being barely on the other end of that, I think. Um, I'd say that Miami's recent surge kind of vaults them into that, but it's not by an overwhelming margin. Georgia Tech just had a little bit of trouble putting away a pesky Boston College team there. I think when you look at the body of work, Georgia Tech over the course of the season still holds that edge, but I'd say that Miami is playing stronger right now, if that makes sense. From the VT perspective, I'd say it's right there for the toughest game of the year because Georgia Tech was clicking and they were able to find such offensive success, especially on the ground. So I'd say in terms of if it's the toughest game of the year, I'd say it's right up there with the Georgia Tech game, probably just around neck and neck.
Now we go back to last year's matchup, an absolute movie of offensive firepower. And do you think that there's still bad blood from last year's matchup between Miami and the Hokies?
Just based on what's happened, like I'm not sure. I think some players will obviously have it in their mind of like, here's what happened last time. I think that that'll mostly serve as motivation for them to carry into that matchup, being like, hey, like, you lost on, let's call it a controversial Hail Mary attempt overruled after what was on the field. What the opinion is irrelevant to this discussion. Um, but they can be able to use that as a motivation. But I don't think that there's any individual bad blood from that matchup last year, as far as I know.
And then looking ahead to Saturday, it looks like all of Virginia Tech's offensive success is probably going to hinge on Kyron Jones' performance, who has been very volatile this season for the Hokies. What's been your evaluation of him so far for this season and for his whole collegiate career at Virginia Tech? And will he need to do more than just extend plays on his feet to beat Miami, which is what he's been great at? But so far, he hasn't been as good as a pocket passer.
Well, as a pocket passer, I think that that's been one of the biggest, if not the biggest, deficiencies so far that I've seen from Virginia Tech football this year. It's a passing attack that hasn't really elevated. It's a little bit on the receivers, a little bit on drones, kind of spread around, but then you look just at the base numbers and you see, okay, Drones has not hit above 200 yards since week 4 against FCS Wofford. He just came off a 76-yard performance against number 16 Louisville at the time, then delivered another sub 130-yard performance against they play against Florida State this past time out. So I think that there's undeniably been a ceiling placed in this offense right now. And I don't think that Jones will end up having the ability to will the team to an upset on Saturday. purely just because of the breadth of work that I've seen over the season. It does not infuse me with confidence to think, okay, this team can go and elevate itself. I do think that they have what it takes to compete in stretches. You know, you see they're within reach of Florida State at the half. They're beating Louisville at the half. They're competing with a lot of these teams, but the stretch isn't sustained, and they haven't been able to keep it up long enough to win much games this year. To answer your second part of the question, does Drones need to do more than extend plays with his legs to beat Miami? Yes, I'm not confident that he can.
And you're saying that it may not raise the ceiling based on Kyron Jones' play and what you've seen from him so far, but if there's a player that can maybe raise the floor for Virginia Tech, it's most likely going to be Marcellus Hawkins and Terran Stewart in that backfield, who have just been phenomenal for Virginia Tech all season in the ground game. Do you think the Hokies will fare well if they lean heavily on them this Saturday? Because they're going up against a really stout defensive front seven against Miami. How do you think that matchup will go against one another when Miami just coming off a big win against NC State, where they suffocated Hollywood Smothers, who's the best running back in the ACC statistically?
Well, I think that you should look at in this analogy, I'd say look towards how Virginia Tech fared against NC State, where they also took down NC State's back. So there's kind of a little bit of a blueprint there of like, okay, what do you need to do on that front? I think Hawkins and Stewart will have enough success. You've seen they're averaging over 6 yards a carry here. I would say that their performance is going to be roughly similar to the effort that you saw against Florida State, and Florida State is one of the best rushing defenses in the ACC. So I think it's going to be a stellar performance. If I had to put like a grade on it, I'd probably say like an A minus, a B plus if you look at it. Like there's going to be numbers on the ground. I just think that it's going to be the passing numbers that end up holding this team back because you need a balance, and there hasn't really been a balance of being able to rely on the passing attack.
And what are some other players from the Virginia Tech side that need to really step up if they want to spoil Miami's bid to the playoffs?
I'd say you look at the receivers, you look at Aiden Green, you look at Takai Heave, guys who have shown flashes in brief moments this season. You know, one play that stands out to me is during the Cal game when Green's able to create a nice bit of separation and get the Hokies on the board to start off. Being able to create more big plays like that, I think, is the biggest thing. And say what other players need to step up. Obviously Drones aforementioned. I think on the secondary, there's a lot of freshmen that have had to play in the wake of transfers and opt-outs. So seeing some of them step up as well and being able to add another layer, because it seems like the secondary has been the most battered group by the aftermath of prize firing. Like a lot of the players have transferred out, cornerbacks, safeties, some defensive lineman guys. But on that note, to only lose, I believe, 7 guys to either the portal or to opt-outs, Donovan Green not on the team anymore, was reported by Tech Sidelines Andy Bitter per a Hokie spokesperson. So, but then again, you look at it, he hadn't caught a pass in 3 weeks. So this passing attack it hasn't been what's the word? It hasn't been flowing. So I think for if Tech wants to play spoiler in that playoff bid, I think you need more consistency from the receivers. And by proxy, you need more consistency from drones.
Now we see Miami not really being great on the road past 3, 4 games they've played. But do you think that the Franklin hire could spark some juice in the locker room, knowing that this is their head coach? He's been really great at Penn State. And how much could a rowdy Lane Stadium influence this game?
Well, at least from the feelings I get from talking to people on campus since I'm a student here as well, it it seems like there's a little bit of extra pep around just the general fandom a little bit right now. And maybe that's a recency thing. Maybe it turns out, okay, everybody is really bought in. But I think at least the first game that you have, you're gonna have a very, very big crowd. I'm not sure if it sells out. I could see it, however, given like the nature of this game. I think that the Franklin hire will spark some extra juice in the locker room. I'm just not entirely sure yet where it comes from. If you think about it, it's an interesting scenario, and it's one that I wrote about on another another outlet called 33 or 4 Sports. But for Franklin coming in the middle of not the middle of the year, but during the year, it's an interesting scenario where you have like this lame duck staff that is trying to navigate their players through, but then you simultaneously have this new head coach that is coming in, and that is essentially evaluating the players and the coaching personnel that he wants to retain heading into 2026. And you know that not everyone's going to make it because, you've already had two support staffers from Penn State follow Franklin over to Virginia Tech, and there's at least going to be one guy on the chopping block because it seems like Franklin is set on bringing at least some of his guys in. And there's some guys that I think he's going to retain from the coaching carousel. In terms of the players, I honestly have no clue. All that we know right now at this point is that Franklin prefers low maintenance guys, which I think everybody could agree with that.
Yeah, it does look like you guys are very well set up from a recruiting standpoint, though. It already looks like you guys are sniping a bunch of Penn State's former commits, which is a very positive sign for the Hokies. Let's end this off. Can we get your score prediction for the game and who you think will come out on top?
All right, so this is actually going to be identical to the Miami Florida State game score. I think it's going to be 34-14. I think, again, if you just look at the breadth of work, rushing touchdowns, you look at Stewart and you look at Hawkins, they're great at accumulating that chunk yardage, but then you see, okay, there's only one touchdown there to go. Meanwhile, you look at like rushing for this Miami attack, you got Fletcher with 9, Brown with 5, Pringle with 4, and there's more variety there in terms of who can be able to punch their way into the end zone. I think as a whole, Virginia Tech's offense has not been bad. There have been times when it's faltered, especially in the passing game, but this group has not shown success when it comes to being able to punch it in and get into the end zone. And then on the other front, I think up until the Louisville game, this team had not stopped anyone in the red zone. So it's been very unsuccessful when other teams are finding a rhythm. I think that that's where it kind of gets away. If Tech wants to stand a chance of winning the victory, it comes with setting that tone and then being able to maintain that tone. Because you've seen them set that tone before. Did so against Louisville. Did so against Vanderbilt even. They were leading Vanderbilt 20-10 at the half. But maintaining that for 4 quarters and not letting it slip away once the second half, if you want to win the game of college football against a team like this, you have to make adjustments. And I'm not sure that Virginia Tech has the personnel needed to walk out with the victory. I think they keep it close for a quarter, maybe a half, but then the third and fourth quarter is really where you start to see Miami pull away.
Well, Thomas, this has been awesome. And we thank you so much for coming on. Miami fans and Virginia Tech fans are enemies this week, but then allies the next. Everyone in Coral Gables is going to be pulling for Virginia Tech to pull off that rivalry win against Virginia on the last week of the season to hopefully bolster their playoff odds. Miami kicks off against Virginia Tech at 12 p.m. Eastern time in Blacksburg on Saturday, with the Hokies looking to foil the Hurricanes' plans at obviously qualifying for the college football playoff. From Zach Cohen and I, this has been another edition of the TMH Sportscast. See you next time, and as always, go Canes.